The ex-president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, said that Russia will do everything possible to not let happen the Third World War, which sounds something like what a normal politician would say, but then he proceeded and said the following: in case Russia will be under attack, the response will be extreme. What exactly he meant here? Is this another daily nuclear threat by Russia? Is Russia really the country that will prevent the Third World War? And these are the questions that we'll be talking about in today's video. What's up, investors, Kevin Brown and people of Reddit. It's the Russian Dude and this is your daily update on Russian-Ukrainian war as of Tuesday, May 17th. You can see the main events of the day to my right, along with the timestamps. Today, the ex-president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, did a very hypocritical, counterproductive or counterintuitive decision, whatever you want to call it. He basically said that Russia will not let the Third World War to happen, which I mean is something that you would expect a normal politician to say. But we live in pretty abnormal times at this moment, that is why this statement has a second part, which starts with the word but. So the whole statement by Medvedev sounds as following: Russia will not let the Third World War to happen, but in case there is an attack against the territory of Russia, the response will be extreme. What he meant here, at least in his own mind, is that Russia once again was threatening with the nuclear attacks. Which is just like if any country decides to attack Russia, we will destroy it with nukes. And obviously after this we are not expecting anyone to respond. Russian nuclear attack will be justified and other nations will understand this. I would say that every single kid understands that this statement is very counterintuitive. I mean, how can you claim that you will be the country who will prevent the Third World War and at the same time you're saying that you will be the country which will start the Third World War? How can you possibly imagine that in case the nukes are used, there'll be no response at all from anyone else? And I mean, how can you even threat to use the nukes when you are the person who just said 1 or 2 days ago that the consequences of using the nuclear weapons are completely unacceptable? But well, that's the position of the ex-president of Russia, and as we all already know, these statements are usually not real. And by the way, if you like this style of daily news reporting, feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, please make sure to check the link in the description if you wish to receive additional content such as daily Zoom calls and Q&As. All the proceeds will be donated to Ukraine at the end of each month. Thank you so much and let's continue. Welcome to another episode of Ridiculous Russian Propaganda, and today we have the member of Russian parliament Sergei Mironov, who said that Russia should cancel all the further elections. Yes, you heard this right. Parliament elections, presidential elections, everything should be cancelled. His main reasoning is that these elections, they always take so much money and this money should be better used sponsoring the army of Russia. He also added that it doesn't make sense to spend money for different parties competing against each other when this money should be sent to these liberated regions of Donbass. And I mean, in some way he has a point, because I don't think honestly elections in Russia mean much. Russia will have its Tsar, unfortunately, for as long as it is needed, and the main political party will also be the same, which is Единая Россия. So I guess in this case, maybe yes, Sergei Mironov makes some kind of sense, because money spent on political campaigns are kinda wasted. Today, the press secretary of Russia, Dmitry Peskov, did a press conference where you can already hear that the narrative of Russia against Ukraine has been significantly changing, and so here are his main statements. First of all, he mentioned that eventually every single war will end in peace, and in this peaceful time, the voice of Russia will be heard. The second thing he was talking about is that it is impossible to isolate Russia from the rest of the world, neither from diplomatic nor from economic standpoint. Third thing, he was talking about Ukrainians. He said that this is a very talented, peaceful and brotherly nation to Russia. But the reason why they are the way they are right now, it is because Western countries have been fooling the brains of Ukrainians way for too long. So as you can see, this strong and hostile narrative about Ukrainian Nazis is kinda slowly disappearing. And guess what? The advisor to the president of Ukraine, Alexei Arestovich, also saw the changing narrative of Russia against Ukraine. He was mainly focusing on words of Peskov about the Crimean Peninsula. He said that in the past, Russia was always talking about the Crimea Crimea as their historical territory, which must return to Russia. But now Peskov was talking about Crimea as the territory in question, which basically means, according to Arestovich, that Russia is preparing in some way its citizens that it might give up Crimea in order to achieve peace with Ukraine. Because imagine this, if Russia suddenly gives up Crimea, Russian patriots will be like, why would you do this? Why would you let Ukrainians take back our Crimea? Which obviously will create some confusion among these people, and they will start questioning the actions of their favorite Putin. But at the same time, if you prepare their mindsets that Russia might give up Crimea in the nearest future, the reaction will not be as bad. The next thing Peskov mentioned is that he will do everything possible to change the mindset of his friends who still do not believe in the purpose of this special military operation. And then he added that every single Russian should do the same. Speaking about this special military operation, he mentioned that everything goes in accordance with whatever schedule. Then he destroyed the rumor that President of Russia Vladimir Putin was planning to visit Turkey. And lastly, he mentioned that even though Russia is still considering the United States of America as unfriendly country, probably in the nearest future Russia will remove the restrictions from Instagram and Facebook. Which, if you might not know this, at this very moment Facebook and Instagram is prohibited in Russia. This was because of the statement that Facebook made almost in the beginning of this war, when they allowed to send death threats and death wishes to Russian soldiers. And because of this, Russia is now considering Facebook and Instagram to be extremist organizations. Today, Vladimir Zelensky participated in the funeral of the first president of Ukraine, Leonid Kravchuk, who died last week, May 10th. Leonid Kravchuk was one of the politicians who signed the Belovezhsky Agreement, which ended the USSR era. And because of this, the independent country of Ukraine was born, with Leonid Kravchuk becoming its first president. The member of Ukrainian negotiations team, Mikhailo Podolyak, said that at this very moment negotiations between Russia and Ukraine have completely stopped. He is certain that in the nearest future they will be resumed, most likely because of the initiative by Zelensky. And he also mentioned that at this very moment Ukraine is no longer considering giving up any of its territories to satisfy Russian needs. Because if you remember, in the past, one of the main requirements from Ukrainian side was that Russian army must move back to the territories which they occupied before the invasion, which happened on February 24th. But now, when Ukraine saw that fighting Russians is not as complicated as they thought in the very beginning, the requirements have changed. As a result, making Russia leave Ukrainian territories is no longer enough, and from now on, Ukraine will now also be demanding the return of its occupied territories, specifically the regions of Donbass and Crimea. There are several reports that claim that Vladimir Putin will now be more involved in this special military operation. Specifically, what this means is that in the past, Putin let his generals and admirals take the decisions that they think were the best ones. But now, because most likely this war is taking way longer than anticipated, Putin was like, okay, I gotta make my own decisions from now on. And I mean, he would still listen to the advice of generals and admirals, or I mean at least of those who are still not yet purged, but the final decision will be taken by him. Today, the first groups of injured soldiers from Azovstal factory started arriving in the city of Novoazovsk. It was reported that 10 buses full of injured soldiers were able to leave the territory of the factory. At this very moment, these people are getting long-awaited medical assistance. Because as a reminder, these people were trapped beneath this factory for more than 2 months already. And besides that, they had limited access to food, sleep and medical assistance, and they were under constant bombardments from the Russian army. Ukrainian side responded that these soldiers were basically rescued. But at the same time, Russian side says that these Ukrainians will be from now on the prisoners of war of Russia. But as always, the main thing is that these people were finally able to be rescued and finally started receiving medical assistance. Today, 188 out of 200 Finnish parliament members have voted for the country joining the NATO. And not long after this voting, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland, Pekka Haavisto, signed the application of the country to join NATO. In addition to that, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, Anna Lindh, also signed the same application for Sweden to join the alliance. Which basically means that these two countries might potentially join NATO at the same time. Which is, to be honest, a very bad news for Russia, because one of the main goals of Russia since the beginning of this special military operation was to prevent NATO from expanding its territories. And in addition to that, the alliance will now have access to more military personnel, soldiers, artillery, military vehicles and weapons. For example, in this picture you can see how many soldiers as well as different military items these both countries of Finland and Sweden have. And yes, if you remember, yesterday Putin made a statement about these countries joining the NATO. He basically said that Russia is kinda not against these countries joining the NATO, but in case they do, we will respond. And by the way, the advisor to the president of Ukraine, Alexei Arestovich, now thinks that Ukraine might also have some chances to join the alliance. His main reasoning for this is that one of the main members of NATO, which is the United States of America, has positive attitude towards more countries joining the alliance. And even though Russia might be against Ukraine joining it, the US will make it easier for Ukraine to join the alliance in case they decide to do it. And by the way, speaking about Finland and Sweden joining the NATO, yesterday the president of Turkey, Recep Erdogan, said that Turkey will not be able to say yes to these countries joining the alliance. Turkey is the member of the NATO since 1952. And today the country announced its demands, which must be met in order for Turkey to, I guess, allow Sweden and Finland joining the NATO. There was several demands made by Turkey, but they can be categorized into main two requirements. The first requirement is that Sweden and Finland must acknowledge the Kurdistan Workers' Party to be a terroristic organization. And briefly, the country of Turkey is having very big problems with Kurdistan Workers' Party. And the second requirement is to remove embargo and sanctions from the military sector of Turkey. Recep Erdogan said that as soon as these requirements are met, this is when Turkey might consider allowing Finland and Sweden joining the alliance. Thank you so much for your attention, check the link in the description, stay safe and see you tomorrow.